Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of A Day in the Life Cybersecurity. My name's Simon Linstead. I'm the host and founder of the info-sec Live community, and I'm here today with Den Knowles, the co-founder of info-sec-tek. Welcome, Den. Please tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Hi Simon, thanks for having me on. So my name's Den. I've worked in the finance sector for probably about 10 years in various roles of IT delivery, business analyst, each kind of having a security focus to it. But over the last 3 or so years, I moved explicitly into security dedicated roles. So I ran an information security team in a FTSE 100. And from there, I decided to break out on my own and found the company.
Wow. Let's go back. So working for a big firm, one of the FTSE 100, is something that I've never done. I have worked for some big organizations, but not that big. What's it like, I suppose, one, getting into cybersecurity in that kind of environment, and two, working there day to day?
So getting into cybersecurity in that environment, it was a natural progression and trajectory from the work I was doing. So if I take a step back, I'll just kind of run you through perhaps a little bit of a career history and how to where I got to where I am. So go all the way back to then at the age of 16, pushing trolleys around Asda car park, moved on to be a forklift driver. I then got a job in a credit card call centre for a major bank. Went travelling, came back in the middle of the 2008 economic crisis. I'm sure you remember shortly after they ended, boom and bust.
Yeah.
And decided that moving back into England wasn't the best move, so I ended up moving to Jersey and doing a similar job in card services. But what was slightly different is I started to get involved in fraud investigations. So that's kind of where my interest in compliance and financial crime really started. And because it was a private bank, these were, really kind of big card frauds and, some cases that were almost like nation state governments battling it out over kind of company disputes and things of that nature.
Wow.
A few years later, I returned to the UK and started working for a FTSE 100 insurer in the call centre, moved into a business analyst role. Within 6 months of being a BA, I was then a senior BA recruiting other business analysts into the team and standing that up. And that was quite unique insofar that we were dealing with a third-party SaaS product that was utilising cloud technology. And it was a heavily integrated system, and you'll probably appreciate this. So it was a financial point of sale system. And the users of that were the biggest building society in the world and the biggest mortgage network in Europe. So we're talking about bonds, ISAs, unit trusts, protection.
I reckon I've got a fairly good idea what platform that is, but I'm not going to mention it.
I think you probably do. So, at the time, it was quite sort of cutting edge, and it was almost like a proto DevOps. I was managing the support function and doing the change and delivery, and that's kind of where security really sort of started to fold in. So we had to be mindful of what the pen tests and kind of how those are executed, and certificate renewals and all that kind of standard BAU stuff. But we also had the identity and access management. So we're doing things like access recertifications, well ahead of the curve of any of the other teams in the organization. But that was simply a license cost thing, but the practice was there. From there, after about 5 years doing that, I moved into become an IT manager, working with major MSPs and providing oversight for security for projects and other teams. And after about a year doing that, my boss left and I assumed his role in a kind of interim basis as the head of IT. So I then managed and oversaw the security team, which was formed of contractors. And at that point, I then dropped into the ISM role. I recruited a team, and then we went into lockdowns and COVID. And during that kind of 2-year period I was working in that role, we had to implement a number of technical controls within the cloud environment, implement vulnerability management, due diligence processes. We were doing contract reviews, we're running the BAU firewalls as well as having implemented them. So it was really quite interesting and diverse. And the team I was able to form was really one of the best I've worked with in the industry. Yeah, so I decided to break out on my own for the tail end of last year. So when you've been at an organisation for kind of 11 plus years, you feel like you're kind of part of the furniture, and you want to move on to different challenges and, kind of see if the skills you learned do apply in the real world. And I've been working with some private companies and with some public sector, and it seems like that the skills that you learn within those types of organisations are applicable to different types of industries.
Would you say the pandemic had a hand in you making that decision, or had you made the decision to break out on your own before you were kind of working from home and perhaps getting to spend a bit more time with the family?
That's an interesting one. So I think it certainly changed the frame, but I was in a new role at the time. So having done that, I didn't really know anything different. But
yeah,
I think when you've been somewhere for so long, there's that kind of risk of feeling stale, and you want to move on and progress and see what's out there in the wider world for you.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes, especially, I've worked for, biggest organisation probably I've worked for is Aegon, the Dutch financial company. And you are very much a number there. It was a good company to work for, but you also get to a ceiling limit with regards to the role that you're doing. And I was in a sales role, and the next level I could have gone to would have been the kind of office branch sales manager, which is something that I would never want to do. So again, that's what drove me to leave and set up my own business in financial services years ago. How have you found, because you said about starting your job in 2008, when that crash happened is when I set up my financial services business. And you could say that was a crazy thing to do at that time, but it wasn't, because I liken it to this industry where there was big change going on, and financial services, as you'll be aware, was going through a transition from commission to fees. And
RDR.
And we set up with an RDR ready model 3 years before RDR came. So we were ahead of the game, talking to clients in, I suppose, the legal profession, more than other firms, because of the clarity on fees. And also when you looked at the actual contractual terms and the reduction in yield that commission took off the plans, these cowboy advisors who'd been going around telling people that it didn't cost you anything, it's all right, we get paid by the company, when really you end up paying 3 times as much. So I think you can liken the cybersecurity industry to that. In big players have had their hands on most of the market up until the last few years. We're now seeing an exponential increase in smaller companies needing to adopt an improved security posture. How have you found it then, going from that, I know I'm getting my salary every week or every month, to I'm on my own now, I've got to find some clients? How did you find that first client? Because I think people will be interested in that.
Well, it's kind of incidentally someone I already knew. So, it kind of at this point, we're looking to build up, but we're focused on developing kind of what would an accessible proposition for SMEs look like. And the answer for that isn't perhaps as clear as it could be, because obviously you've got a whole suite of tools out there, from established vendors, but there is a cost barrier to entering that space.
There is, and especially if you're talking about even just the scanning tools to get you started. I've looked at the cost of Qualys and some other bits and pieces, and when you're then talking to small firms who've got 20-25 staff, you have then got those huge cost barriers to entry, haven't you? And it's finding that streamlined way where you can, I suppose, automate as much as you can while still providing that human part.
Yeah, and that's perhaps an interesting point, because you need such a diverse range of tools to kind of have a sensible security posture. But then, as much as there is a single pane of glass, when you have 10 of them, it starts to feel a bit more like a greenhouse. So I think there is space as organizations moving towards DevSecOps for automation to fulfill some of those functions and tie that together a little bit better. So yeah, there's also an emerging set of tools as well to kind of address some of the cloud challenges that you see, you know, like kind of your CASBs and things like that. And the you know, CPSMs, and they're kind of positioned as almost like a very mature tool, but they're very immature, and there's still some ways to go before that kind of develops. And I think you know, part of the challenges that we had when we were working in a large organization is, yes, we could access these tools, but then you had the question, and it's like, well, which tools worked well together? Yeah. So you may not take the best of breed tool because it was incoherent with the rest of your tool set. You may take one that perhaps doesn't do everything that the best of breed does, but it plays nice with your existing estate.
That's a very good point. Let's stick on tools for a moment and relate that to what it is you're actually doing for clients. So to get some clarity, we see a lot of firms out there who are virtual CISOs. You've then got the kind of pen testing firms. Where does info-sec-tek sit in that suite of companies?
Well, that's a good question. So we're still trying to work that out. We're doing some ad hoc work. So we've worked with, as I say, a couple of smaller firms, and that be insofar of kind of dealing with the real basic kind of stuff. So the low cost sort of thing. So we migrated a e-com platform from a hosted solution to a cloud-based solution, but part of what we did there was improve a lot of the kind of security mechanisms, specifically around email and things like that, and, you know, kind of giving recommendations about, well, how do you actually secure you know, the machine you have in your shop, because, you know, someone could just walk in and do whatever. So I think there's a lot of scope for giving guidance on, you know, the real kind of basics, and you'd be quite surprised that even larger organizations haven't implemented the basics and are going off.
I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Yeah, you can, you know, normally have a look at what's kind of published externally. You can see that actually, you know, email security suffers particularly badly from this. So, you know, you might see large organizations with just like an SPF record and, you know, no DMARC kind of policy to back that up. So they're kind of vulnerable to, you know, brand spoofing and things like that. Or, you know, they may have defensively registered some domains, but not put kind of DNS records on there. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of really simple things that can be done to improve security for SMEs without having to kind of go down the tool path.
Okay, so when we were talking earlier, Den, you mentioned the fact that you've been involved in recruiting people within the cybersecurity industry before, and I know lots of our viewers are really interested in that. So could you just tell us a bit about your experience, please?
Sure. So I've interviewed and recruited business analysts, developers, security engineers, delivery managers, scrum masters. So it's quite a wide spectrum. But as a rule of thumb, there are kind of two main areas I look at when I'm assessing candidates. So the first of those being technical capability, and the second of those being well, social skills. So I think we're probably comfortable when we're talking about you know, technical areas, and you know, it's not necessarily even the knowledge they have, it's the ability to learn new technology and how quickly they can do that. But really the social element is quite important to me, and that's really important when you're trying to create successful teams. You need to be able to trust your team to be able to go and represent the interests of your team, interact with stakeholders, be able to negotiate and influence. So I would very happily take a trade-off for someone less technical but very good at talking to people every day of the week. And I think it's kind of specifically around security as well. It doesn't exist in isolation. It exists to service the business.
It's relationships, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And relationship management is a real skill and bordering on an art. And, you know, we hear a lot about kind of talking with the C-suite and influencing the exec, but really to kind of be a successful team, it has to go laterally with your peers.
It's got to go laterally. You've got to engage the IT team as well. You've got to engage the PAs, you've got to engage the admin, you've got to engage everyone. I mean, that's the crux of it, isn't it? And one thing I get thrown at me a lot is, I'm going to ask you this because you've worked for big organizations. Some people think it's a benefit to learn a particular system, say we use the system in financial services called Intelligent Office. I'm sure you're aware of that from what you've done before. Yeah. And I can't remember what the question was now because I've just stumped myself. So we used Intelligent Office. So when it came to looking to recruit PAs or paraplanners, people who'd help put the reports together, we would always look at someone more favorably who had system knowledge around that, because it saved us 6 weeks of training. So my knowledge of the cybersecurity industry isn't that great, as everyone knows. So does that play any relevance in cyber? So if you were looking to get a job and you were targeting the bigger firms, is it worth focusing on that? Or would you say it's still better to focus on the personal development, the social branding side of it?
So I think it's a mix. So I think being able to demonstrate technical capability is very good. So, say, for example, have certifications to administer certain brands of firewalls, that's good. But, there is nuance between the technology sets, but the principles are going to be more or less the same. But, it's debatable with certifications, isn't it? So that they have utility, but having a number of these certifications myself, they almost get you in on a bit of a treadmill where you're continuously having to jump through their loops. And
it's a money making machine is what it is, because you get letters after your name that you have to pay for every year. It's no different in financial services or any other industry. And the problem I've got with that in all industries, especially this and financial services, is that some exams are memory exams, where if you've got a memory, I haven't got one of these memories, by the way. I've got like a sponge with a raincoat on rather than a sponge. But some people can retain knowledge to pass an exam but not understand any of it. And I've worked with people in financial services like that who've had chartered status through passing exams, but they were the worst financial planners I'd ever met. And there's a lot of correlation between that and cybersecurity. Now, I'm not saying any of you people out there with exams are like that. I'm really not, because that isn't the case. But you have to be able to show that you can relate the knowledge that you've learned, which I think makes a lot of the exams redundant, other than showing a yardstick of your progress throughout certain points.
Yeah, so, I suppose by way of an example, I've interviewed people who are hugely credentialed, have a lot of certifications, but they interview quite poorly because they don't have that social element, even to the point where they're answering the question they formulated in their own mind and not the question you've asked.
Yeah, I think I've done that before.
So, but I have hired people who haven't had necessarily any kind of certifications, but were able to demonstrate almost like value and how they can apply what they've learned in a business scenario. And that's been, some of those have been kind of the biggest successes in the people I've recruited. And that's been both in the security space and the business analyst space. So
it could be easy for people who haven't got those natural soft skills to get disheartened hearing comments like that, and I know people do sometimes, but I'm telling you, it's a learnable skill, the same as anything's learnable. We're not all natural at anything until we've practiced it, and social skills and soft skills are one of those that you can improve 100%.
And you can learn it in the context of cybersecurity as well. Yeah. So, you have Chris Hagnani and, all the work he's done around social engineering. And that really kind of ties back to kind of how you influence people and building up rapport. And that is directly useful in the workplace when you have to go and influence and build up rapport. And you can use those techniques. So just understanding how attackers are using this, you can apply that and build really meaningful relationships in a work context.
It's little tips as well. I've done a free course in the community on it's actually on goal setting, I think, but there's a part in there on listening skills and the difference between active listening and what dialogue actually is, rather than just a conversation. And even by remembering to do simple things like maintain that eye contact throughout the conversation, make sure that people can see that you are actually listening to what they're saying. And as you said a moment ago, what you're not meant to be doing when you're sitting there is waiting to get your next point across. And you can tell when that happens because people's eyes are glazed until there's a gap in the conversation, and then they just launch in with their irrelevant comment. And a lot of that is nerves. You know, interview situations aren't particularly pleasant, but a dialogue is when two people have a common reason for having that conversation, and they have that interest in what each other is saying. And there's too many conversations, not enough dialogue, I think. And in an interview situation, learning some tips and techniques about eye contact, about mirroring body language signals, simple things like that can make a huge difference to you getting the job or not getting the job.
Yeah, and with these kind of techniques and things like that, there's a lot of good stuff out there, but there's also kind of a lot of quite dicey advice as well. So,
yep.
And as you said, it's about getting the practice in, getting your reps in, and in a kind of home scenario, that's a very good place to sort of try these sorts of things out. And you mentioned about, was it body mirroring? But if you read Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, then he talks about mirroring in terms of repeating the last three words of what someone said.
Using someone's name as well is very effective in building rapport, mimicking in many ways. So it's also listening to whether people are visual or auditory in their explanations. So when people describe something, if you went to the park, for example, I went to the park and saw an amazing red balloon. It means that you are a visual explainer or a visual learner. Whereas if you went to the park and you can't hear balloons, but bad example, you went to the park and it was a glorious day with the birds singing and the band playing in the background, it means that you're more of an auditory person. And it's loads of little differences like that. And as you rightly say, there's a lot of shady advice out there. But if you go with any of the kind of back to basics on listening skills, you can't go wrong, and you shouldn't have to pay for any of it. It's all on YouTube. Just skim past the conspiracy theories and you'll be fine. So let's focus on DevSecOps. Let's talk about that for a little while. So it's an area that I could even call it a buzzword. I see it a lot at the moment being flashed around. It's definitely becoming more prevalent. Let's hear your opinion on DevSecOps and where it's going.
So it feels like it's the kind of natural response to DevOps. Security does need to be included in that, and it's not clear that DevOps has achieved that. So kind of where my feel is at the moment is a number of organizations have adopted Agile development methodologies, and around the same time, maybe a little bit after, everyone's decided to move to sort of cloud technologies in various forms. So whether we're talking about maybe your AWS's or Azure's, or we're talking about essentially third-party SaaS type products, there is that drive to move out of the data center. But a kind of a consequence of using these agile methodologies, it's never really clear where security kind of frames into that, because it's the relationships between the development team and the customer, and it's about this concept of value. So where does security play into that? And I know there are a lot of developers out there who are very security focused, but there are just as many who aren't. And that can be a challenge, especially when you're external to those development teams, and almost some of the Scrum methodology can provide a little bit of a barrier for you to getting in and making sure things
security is an afterthought, I think they call it, don't they?
Yeah. And that's perhaps a problem where some of these larger organizations have these kind of monolithic security assurance type processes, and they're misaligned to Agile, they're misaligned to DevOps. And as we're moving more towards DevOps, there's a focus on kind of automation and continuous feedback. So really you can utilize that automation to have a security benefit. So as developers are developing code and checking it in, you fire it out to a SaaS platform, they remediate and all that kind of good stuff. But I think it's acknowledged there's a shortage of security professionals, and I think as much as we talk about bringing new people into the industry, we have a lot of IT professionals there who might not be overtly security, but they have the technical knowledge to understand how to apply security. So the security professionals need to take their place in the cross-functional team, or they need to give oversight to the IT professionals and the developers to enable them to be more secure in their practices. And, if organizations adopt that and allow IT teams to have the space to learn and implement and really not pursue such aggressive timelines, then you can have real security benefit. And probably what a business kind of benefit that is, you reduce the technical debt that needs to be resolved in the future. And, I've seen it happen whereby so much technical debt's accrued by development teams that sprint 1, 2, 3, 4 look great, but after that they're having to go back and rework, and it's taking longer and longer and longer.
I mean, where I've seen improvements in DevSecOps is in the investor community. So there's a lot of VCs and angel investors out there who are putting a lot of money into tech startups, a lot of app developers, and a lot of them are now making it part of their proposition to have that security integrated, because what these VCs and angel investors have got that the developers haven't got is the knowledge of what power that will bring when it comes to bringing this product to market. Because let's not forget, security can be a huge plus for the marketability and the saleability of a product or solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think probably the last couple of years, sort of start off with the whole SolarWinds thing, and the L-print nightmares, recently the Log4j stuff, and with the increased focus from perhaps the executive orders out of the Biden administration in the middle of last year, and how that's starting to reflect in kind of the NIST standards for developer.
We mentioned that earlier actually when we were off camera. Do you want to elaborate on that a bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think as a response to maybe the Colonial Pipeline incident or something like that, there was an executive order to improve the infrastructure in the US. So NIST have kind of come along and added some secure design requirements into their developer standards. And subsequently from that, with the reissue of OWASP, insecure design is now one of the top 10 items. So, and this again kind of reiterates why the monolithic kind of security, once and done, it isn't really going to work anymore. And you have to. We use the term shift left, almost interchangeably with DevSecOps or SecDevOps or rugged DevOps or whatever you want. But security has to start right at the very beginning, And if we're talking about project lifecycle, we're talking from really the design stage. But you might want to go even further back to kind of the procurement and contract stage. So in certain organisations, I have seen kind of IT unaware of a product that's been purchased until the contract's thrown over the fence and they're asked to implement it.
It's the dream to get to that point at concept stage, isn't it? But I think we're way off that.
Yeah, and I think there are some really positive moves in the industry towards having really kind of secure design. I think threat modeling is quite an accessible way to engage developers and improve that, and that all really kind of works well with the old DevOps infinity loop and all that kind of good stuff.
So Den, thank you so much for taking the time out to speak to me today. Some final thoughts though before we go. If you could give one piece of advice to those who are trying to break into the cybersecurity industry, what would it be?
So there's a whole domain of knowledge out there that isn't explicitly security, but is very useful to assist in understanding security. And I think we're talking about relationship management, understanding cloud technology, so all the kind of virtualization, containerization, methodologies that aren't explicitly security, like ITIL, so business analysis practice, even process automation like Six Sigma, and delivery and project methodologies as well are quite useful. So understanding how Agile works, even waterfall, and architecture and secure design is going to be something that's quite key. So understanding a holistic piece in IT will enable you to speak to other teams that you need to influence, engage in language they understand, and it makes you more relatable, and they can relate to you, and you build better relationships, and you achieve better security outcomes by doing that.
Absolutely. One quick question, because I know that you've worked in kind of help desk environments before. I think you've worked in help desk environments before. We've linked up with KevTech IT over in the States, and he helps people win jobs in desktop and help desk support. He's now looking at trying to help some people, including himself, break into the cybersecurity market. And I had a conversation with him last week, and I think these guys and girls are perfect for the roles in cyber. And I think for me, it was all the knowledge they've got that I realized I was missing last year when I wanted to be a pen tester, and I kind of wanted to jump past all that knowledge like a lot of people do. And I think the IT help desk's knowledge and experience that they have is second to none, and I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I ran a help desk, so we were remoting into mortgage advisors' machines, and if you're in that environment, one piece of advice is never check their internet history.
You're gonna have to elaborate on that.
Yeah, there's all sorts of horror stories there. You know, you have people looking at porno on their work machines, people downloading torrents, you know.
Well, I think torrents, I mean, admittedly it was my own business, but at the time I may have been dabbling in downloading the odd film before I knew how bad that was. And I expect you guys see that a lot when you're working out where that virus came from on that system.
Yeah, probably the most interesting one was someone had South Park: The Stick of Truth installed on their work machine, and they're letting the kids use it, and they had client data all over the desktop. It's
brilliant.
So fact finds the whole lot, you know.
Love it. So we're digressed away from the value that help desk people can bring. If you were help desk and you were now looking to break into cyber, what would your route in be?
That's a good question. So I think there's a lot of transposable skills. You know, the dealing with people aspect and having an understanding of how operating systems work is definitely useful. I think it's kind of generally accepted that the kind of GRC kind of areas, the way in, and that can kind of leverage you onto other things.
You say that, but you know, most people aren't aware of that, Den. And I think because you're in the industry, you know that. I've seen that the last few months with regards to the flood of people going red team and the other flood of people going blue team, and no one wanting to do the boring compliance bit in the middle, when the boring compliance bit in the middle is not only the framework that everything else runs off, but it's also your way in to the industry. I think a much easier way in than red or blue.
Yeah, I'd say it's probably more accessible. I think as you kind of progress down that, there are definitely challenges with, you know, kind of all that sort of risk management stuff, and there are different types of challenges. So you definitely have that kind of social side to it. You know, how many auditors are social is probably an interesting fact.
Yeah, again, I would have expected you, when I asked about what help desk people are bringing, I was going to expect you to say their kind of background tech knowledge of troubleshooting things, but really like the major thing these people bring across is their ability to communicate the technical in a manner that people who are not technical can understand. And that's something that I think is discounted too much.
Yeah, and that is exactly the skill that makes a good business analyst.
Yeah.
You know, the interface between the business and the tech people, and you know, a lot of roles in security are very similar in that regard. So there are a lot of BAs who would make very good security managers, security analysts, or whatever, because they are able to take those complex concepts and articulate them in simple terms, for sure. So,
well, you've heard it here, folks. Den's telling you, if you're help desk support, your way in is through governance, risk and compliance. You heard it here first. Den, thank you so much for your time.
It's one way.
It is one way. I'm pulling your leg. It is. The skills are transferable, I think, across the board. And again, it depends on where your real interest is. And I'll finish off by saying, I don't think cybersecurity is an industry you can get an entry-level role in unless you've got previous experience relating to something, whether that's computer experience or compliance or sales or whatever it might be. I don't think there is a true entry-level role in cyber. And the other one would be not to discount that fundamental knowledge that you need, because it's the same. I liken it to algebra and maths. You know, if you don't learn your times table when you're in primary school, when you have to start up in your game in high school and you're doing formulas, you're all in all sorts of trouble. And cybersecurity is no different, is it?
Absolutely. There is a base level of knowledge that needs to be there to be effective in the role. And, you know, even kind of basic understanding the concept. So, you know, even like the sys domains at a kind of glance, that'd be useful. And yeah, it's difficult to see entry level roles, and the ones that are entry level are generally kind of administrator and aren't fulfilling. And I think you've got to have a real drive for it as well. You know, it's a well compensated area for sure, but
it is. But the money isn't enough of a driver, and the reason I say that is because even with me not working in a technical capacity or giving advice in cybersecurity, I still spend over an hour a day digesting news and information on what's happening to stay up to date. So I can't imagine, if you're only in it for the money, why or how you would possibly drive a successful career out of it, because you have to have that passion for the subjects in the first place. I think that genuine interest, don't you?
Yeah, and for me and a number of other people I know, there's a very ethical and moral dimension to it. So you know, there's a sense of kind of doing right and wanting to make sure that the assets are protected from the bad people.
But this is the difference, Den, between those of you who were either hackers back in the day or working in the industry back in the day, is it was very much, I'm not going to say us against them and against the corporates, but it was about being the good guy, wasn't it? And doing it for the right reasons. And I think now, because of the monetization of it and the glamorization of it, you've got a lot of people coming into it for different reasons. And I suppose that was the warning shot that I was trying to fire out there to people who think they can sit a few exams and come into an industry and jump in on one of these 90, 100 grand a year salaries, because I think there are a lot of training providers out there promising people that, when in reality, it's not true. Don't get me wrong, you'll always get opportunities that some people will land, but if you haven't got the fundamentals behind it, you're not adding value to firms, and I can't see you being taken on, and that's the brutal truth, I think.
Yeah, and it's hard graft as well. There's a lot of frequent task switching. It's very kind of mentally demanding, and you know, when you don't get something quite right, that really weighs heavy on you. And that's perhaps something that, you know, I don't see spoken about a huge amount. I mean, there's a little bit out there, but there is an emotional drain on people who work in the industry for sure, and I think that's why the dropout rate is quite high.
I think you're absolutely right, and you hit the nail on the head when you told me that you'd taken a few months off after finishing work for the big firm to try and de-stress and spend time with the family. And I think with any job as stressful as this, relaxation and spending time with our loved ones is so important, because otherwise you do experience burnout, and then you're no use to anyone, are you?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I think it was an ongoing continuation over many years from kind of, you know, high pressure roles, but you know, I think the lockdown was certainly put a different perspective on things for sure.
So Den, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really insightful and an absolute pleasure. It's been a few months since we've caught up, so I'm super excited to see what happens next time we catch up. Final words for everyone. Say goodbye, Den.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks ever so much.
Final word is, if someone asks you for help them.
Yeah,
don't be a dick about it.
Thanks ever so much. Den, it's brilliant. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you don't already, and watch out here for the next episode. See you soon.